Welcome to Catalytic Leadership, the podcast designed to help leaders intentionally grow and thrive. Here is your host, author, and leadership and executive coach, Dr. William Attaway.
Hey, it's William, and welcome to today's episode of the Catalytic Leadership Podcast. Each week, we tackle a topic related to the field of leadership. My goal is to ensure that you have actionable steps you can take from each episode to grow in your own leadership. Growth doesn't just happen. My goal is to help you become intentional about it. Each week, we spotlight leaders from a variety of fields, organizations, and locations. And my goal is for you to see that leaders can be catalytic no matter where they are or what they lead. I draw inspiration from the stories and journeys of these leaders, and I hear from many of you that you do too. Let's jump into today's interview. I'm so excited today to have Mark Herschberg on the podcast. Mark's the author of the Career Toolkit, Essential Skills for Success That No One Taught You, and creator of the Brain Bump app. From tracking criminals and terrorists on the dark web to creating marketplaces and new authentication systems, Mark has spent his career launching and developing new ventures at startups and Fortune 500s and in academia, with over a dozen patents to his name. He helped to start the Undergraduate Practice Opportunities Program, dubbed MIT's Career Success Accelerator, where he teaches annually. At MIT, he received a BS in physics, a BS in electrical engineering and computer science, and a master's in electrical engineering and computer science, focusing on cryptography. At Harvard Business School, Mark helped create a platform used to teach finance at prominent business schools. He also works with many nonprofits, currently serving on the board of Plant a Million Corals. He was one of the top-ranked ballroom dancers in the country and now lives in New York City, where he's known for his social gatherings and his diverse cufflink collection. Mark, I can't wait for this interview. This is going to be great. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.
I would love for you to share some of your story with our listeners, particularly around your journey and your development as a leader. How did you get started?
Really good question, because I started off with the least amount of training you could possibly get. When I came out of MIT, I started my career as a software engineer, and I had some tech skills. MIT was pretty good for that. I started out just doing coding. Now, I knew early on I wanted to become a CTO, a Chief Technology Officer. Mm-hmm. It was the 90s, and I had lots of friends who would say, hey, I've got a fancy degree, and it's the 90s, I'm doing a tech startup, give me lots of money, I'm going to call myself C whatever title. And they had those titles. They didn't know what they were doing, but they had the titles. I knew I didn't want to be one of those people. I said, I want to learn what I need to do. And I met other CTOs, and I watched and I learned. I said, okay, there's a bunch of other skills I know I will need. Yes, I have to be a good engineer, but there's leadership, hiring, networking, negotiating, team building, communicating, all these other skills. They never covered that in school.
So
I got
true.
a little shortcoming. Yeah. And it's kind of crazy that they do. And there's reasons why school doesn't include this. So I said, well, I have a skill gap. I need to address that. And I began to train myself. We didn't have as many resources as today. We didn't have a podcast like this one I could listen to. So I was on my own, building up the skills. And as I did so, I realized these skills are not just for executives, for everyone. They are for middle management, for individual contributors, for my summer interns. They're for solopreneurs and consultants. They really do apply to all of us. So I began to upskill my team as well. And as I was doing this, MIT did research and got similar feedback, companies saying, these are the skills we want, not just with your students or engineers, but everyone we hire everywhere. And we can't find it either. So that's what led to MIT starting that Career Success Accelerator program. When I heard about it, I said, well, I've got some content. Let me help. And I gave them my content. I thought it'd be one and done. But they said, we have these wonderful professors and they know a lot, but they're not practitioners. So as we do this program, we want people like you involved to bring that practical day-to-day rubber meets the road side to it. And I was lucky enough that in addition to my career, building these tech startups, helping Fortune 500s and doing that work, I also got to teach at MIT for the past few decades and do some work elsewhere. So I've had this wonderful career that all began from the fact that I didn't know what I was doing.
I love that. I think that's true of a lot of leaders. They're thrust into a position. They're really good at something, but then they get thrust into a leadership role. And they look around and people are looking to them to lead. They're like, wait a minute, I didn't sign up for that. I didn't, there was no course there, like you say. I mean, leadership, networking, negotiation, teamwork, effective communication. These are all skills we are told are essential for success. Have to have them. But where's the class? Where's the course on this? Why aren't colleges teaching what you talk about in your book, The Career Toolkit?
It's because colleges have a long and storied history, and they're good at what they've done, which was become a repository for knowledge.
Yeah.
The university system goes back 1,000 years, and it's run by professors. Now, they're wonderful people, but to be a professor, you need to become a deep expert in a small area. You're not just a professor of marketing. You focus specifically on online marketing or event marketing or some narrow area. Just like you're not just a physicist, you're a nuclear physicist, you're a theoretical physicist. You focus on some narrow area.
Yeah.
And that's fine, that's good. But then what happens is we show up as students and say, well, I want to learn to do marketing. So the professors, the experts say, well, okay, we know this field inside and out. So if you take these intro classes and some intermediate and then focus in some area, if you do all that and probably take some general requirements, I need you to take a history, a language, whatever the university says, but you take all these classes we say, we will give you a piece of paper saying you are knowledgeable in this field. We're not saying you're good at it. We're certainly not saying you're a good employee. We're just saying you've acquired this level of knowledge.
Yeah.
That's all universities do. And that was sufficient back circa 1950 when you were a cog in the machine and you got hired and you sat there at your desk and your manager said, here you go, here's some work. And you say, yes, sir. You do it. You take it from your inbox, put your outbox. Okay, sir, what's next? And all you had to do was know how to come up with marketing slogans or create the financial report for the month. And you didn't ask questions and nothing else mattered. But in today's workforce, not only do you need to know engineering or marketing or whatever your field is, you need these other skills. As I mentioned, they're not just for executives because all of us have these dynamic roles. And the university system was just set up to say, we have imparted this knowledge to you. And while that was sufficient in the past, it's not in the future. And the university system, unfortunately, is getting a little stale and out of date.
So true. So true. You talk about people needing a career plan. Now, I'm a planner. I love to plan. I could help people plan and plan myself. Never get tired of it. But a career plan, why do people need a career plan?
Imagine your boss says to you, here is a critical project. 1/4 of the company's revenue depends on the outcome of this project. It's January 1st. Here you go. You've got 12 months. At the end of those 12 months, you have to deliver the answer to us. You say, oh, wow, this is really important. I'm going to go lock myself in my office and work really hard. And I'll see you December 31st. And boy, I hope I get you the right answer. We're out 25% revenue. That would be insane. Your manager would never tolerate that. Your manager, she'd say, this is really important. Come up with a plan. How are you going to get there? And we know whatever plan you come up with, it's not perfect. You don't know exactly what you're doing October 17th, and that's okay. We're going to have a monthly check-in and see, are you on plan? Are you behind? Where are you struggling? Maybe halfway through, things change. That always happens to us on our big projects, and we'll have to adjust the plan. But what you can't do is just say, I'm going to wing it and see you in a year. Now, we know this is true, but if we wouldn't trust winging it when 25% of the company's revenue for a year-long project depends on this, why would we want to wing it when we have a 10, 20, 30-year-long project known as a career where 100% of our revenue depends on. Why are you going to wing that one? And what trips people up is they say, but it's so big and there's so much uncertainty. But that's okay. You don't have to know what you're doing October 17th. You just need to say, you know what? We've got a plan. It's fuzzier further out, but we'll do these regular check-ins to make sure I'm on plan. Now, very importantly, some people say, well, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm my own boss, so I don't need a career plan. Yes, you do. Your career plan for some means progressively bigger titles, manager to director to vice president. For others, your title may not change, but developing these skills, I need to get better at networking to go find more clients. I need to figure out how to manage people better, because on the clients I do kind of supervise people, but I'm not their direct authority, but I need to get them to do things. I need better management skills because the projects are getting bigger. So your career plan includes your own personal development, your own goals for yourself or for the role you need to run your business. So all of us, even entrepreneurs, need career plans.
That's so good. You know, when I've talked about this with people in the past, so often I hear exactly what you said. Oh, it's so big. It's so nebulous. How am I going to know what my career is going to look like 20 years from now? And so they allow the complexity to keep them from ever taking a step toward having any kind of plan. Do you see that as well?
100%. And now let's think back to this year-long project. And let's say it's a project of 10 people. 10 people working for a year, and there's probably a lot of variables. That's a lot. But you wouldn't just say, nope, it's too hard to plan. Let's just wing it. Okay, well, if we need to deliver on December 31st, where do we need to be December 1st? How about a month before that in November? Right? You can backtrack and kind of have some milestones. Again, the milestones are going to be fuzzier further out, and that's okay. If you want to be the vice president at your company in 15 years, where do you need to be in 10 years, 12 years? To be a vice president, let's say you're going to be a vice president of sales. Well, that means you're going to run a sales team of 200 people internationally. Before you can do that, you have to prove to them you have to be able to run a sales team of at least 40 people. And before they put you in charge of 40 people, you need to show you can run a team of 6. Before you can run international sales, you have to run sales for a country or a region. And if that country is the US, before you're given the US, you have to do part of the US, a sub-region of the US, maybe just south or the West Coast. So we know there are milestones. Some of those might be jobs. Before you can be VP, you might need to be a director or an associate VP, or it might just be milestones. Revenue goals, size of team you're managing, or just certain things that you've done, certain achievements that they'll look for. And unlike this year-long project, the answer is right in front of you. What does it take to be a VP at this company? Well, look at the job description or look at the people in the role today. What is it they have achieved? That's your cheat sheet. So you know where you need to be. And now you can start to say, what's that differential between where I need to be and where I am today? And how do I make a plan to close that over the coming years?
I love that. It's like Stephen Covey, right? Begin with the end in mind and then slowly walk it back and build your path from where you are to where you want to be. As an entrepreneur, though, maybe the vice president role is not anywhere on the radar. Maybe your goal is something more like freedom, right? Freedom to navigate your life without the burden of a 9-to-5, or freedom to do things yourself, or if you have a family, with your family that you've never been able to do before. Is the same process work for that?
It is. And now an important thing when I talk about career planning, the questions I have in my book, and they're available for free on the website, it's not just your job skills that we talk about. We talk about, what do you want in life? How much flexibility do you want? How much time in the office? More of the questions are about your life goals than your job goals, because your job and your career should fit into your life instead of trying to fit a life around your job. So you can,
oh my goodness, that's so good. Just that right there, Mark. That's so good.
And we can look and say, well, I do want flexibility. I have friends, for example, who said, I want to retire by 40. This is a trend some people are into. Well, if you want to retire by 40, what are the trade-offs? You have to earn a certain amount of money, and that means they're going to do certain things like spend very little and maximize their revenue. And that might mean taking on annoying clients who are paying really well and doing work they don't like, because that's the trade-off for the future. And so just by understanding the goals and what those milestones are, whether retire by 40 or be able to hand off this part of my business to someone else in 3 years, you can say, where do I need to be? What do I need to achieve? And now some of that might be sales goals or other goals for the company, but then what do I need to do to be able to achieve those goals by this time? And that's your personal development.
You have a lot of experience working with a lot of people in a lot of different contexts. I mean, reading through your bio and hearing a little bit of your story, I'm curious, how would you define leadership?
Leadership, there's a lot of different answers, and my answer is not necessarily the right one. But to me, the answer for leadership, I gave you two versions, because the first is tautological. A leader is someone who has followers.
Yes.
No, it sounds like that is tautological. Like, okay, but it doesn't help me. But if you don't have followers, you're not leading.
That's
That's
true.
what it comes down to. Now, let's take something that's maybe a little more practical. I think leadership is really about setting forth a vision, setting forth a state you want to get into, and then getting people to follow you in achievement of that goal. And that to me is leadership.
Love that. So much of what you're describing and what you're talking about is so incredibly practical, right? It's clear next steps. And that's what I think a lot of people, particularly younger leaders, or particularly people who want to build something that has never existed before, like an entrepreneur, that's helpful to have clear next steps. That clarity is something so often is lacking. You talk about a number of different topics. One of those has to do with building a network. And you've referenced that already in this interview. How should people build a network?
First, just going to mention as a preference to this, the reason I have so many things covered is when you look at so many books out there on leadership or these other skills, they've got an idea, you read it for about 20, 30 pages, and then they've got another 100 pages to fill in the book, just beating the idea over and over. And there's reasons why you have to make a book a certain length.
Yeah.
I hate that. So when I did my book, I said, I've been teaching this for decades. I'm going to get right to the key idea. What is the mental shift you need to think about the skill? And then what are the concrete, practical things you can do? By removing all the extra fluff and let's repeat the same idea 20 times to fill pages, I was able to condense it and put a lot more into the book so it's a practical guide. So with that in mind, let's look at networking.
Yeah.
What do you need to do to be a better networker? The mental shift you need to make is to say networking is not just about finding a job. Too many people think, oh, time to find a new job, I need to network. Networking is really about building an additional capability. So here's what I mean by that. We all carry cell phones.
Yeah.
Now, cell phones, we talk about this as an extension of our mind. I don't have to remember how many widgets the customer ordered last month or what the fastest land mammal is. I can pull it up in seconds. I just keep all the information in my pocket. I pull it up when I need it. I don't need to put all that in my brain.
Yeah.
So the phone's an extension of my knowledge. My network, which is accessible through this very same phone in my pocket, is also an extension of my capabilities. If I need to find who are the 3 best widget manufacturers in France, I have no idea, but I'll bet there's someone in my network who knows that. And I just need to reach out and find the people who can help me. If I'm trying to figure out, hey, what's the impact of AI going to be on my industry? Well, I've got people I know in my industry, people who are AI experts. Let me go ask their opinions, and they're going to help me think through it. So my network is an extension of my own capabilities that can help me solve just about any problem out there. And that's how I think about networking. That's the mental shift. Now, then there are concrete things you can do to be more effective when networking.
Again, so good and so practical. I think you're exactly right. I think people think about networking when they think about, oh, I need a new job. No, I got to network. It's almost like the means to an end, but you're seeing it as a completely different thing. And I love that perspective as an extension. That's brilliant.
It's even worse. Imagine I meet you tonight. We're sitting next to each other at a bar. We start talking. We kind of hit it off. I go, hey, had a really great time hanging out with you. So listen, this weekend I need to move. So why don't you come on over? We're going to carry my couch down. It's only 3 flights. I'll buy pizza. Come on. You're laughing. We had a good time. Don't you want to help me pack up my apartment, carry my couch down? No, Mark, you were fun to hang out with, but easy now. We just met. We don't have that kind of relationship.
Yeah.
If we've known each other 20 years, I said, look, I need your help. So, okay, Mark, no problem. I'll be there for you. Because we need to build the relationship before we ask. So many people, I think, oh, I need a job. Hey, nice to meet you. Do you have a job for me? They should be asked. And that's not how we build relationships. That's not a good way to start being needy.
So good. So you need to start today building the network that you want in 20 years.
Harvey Mackay has a great quote. It's the title of one of his books, Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty. And encapsulates what networking is about.
Love that. Love that. You write about culture, about how companies, organizations, there's corporate culture. How does somebody access that corporate culture, Mark?
Now, are you asking during the interview process or once you're in the company?
As you're interviewing is where I'm thinking about that. And I want to talk about interviewing in a minute, but as you're trying to check out a company and you're kind of kicking the tires, do I want to work here? Is this a good fit? I'm curious how you access that, because so often, in my experience, it's one of those things where you don't really know until you get in it. And then it's a little bit late.
Unfortunately, that tends to be the case. So there's 2 things you need to do. First, you need to ask a lot of questions. And in fact, I have on my website, and all the stuff on my website, it's free. I don't charge you. I don't even ask for your email. You can just take it, download, use it in good health.
Wow.
I have a list of questions to ask, and they really get detailed into asking about culture. Now, the important thing is we need to get detailed. Imagine you're in an interview as a candidate and someone says, well, are you a hard worker? What do you say? Well, not really. So yes, of course, I'm a hard worker. Now, the interviewer is going to say, well, he says a hard worker, check. He's going to say, well, prove it. Give me an example. And we need to do the same thing. What's the culture here? Do you treat your employees well? What's he going to say? Of course we do. Well, prove it. Give me some examples. We're going to hold them to the same standards.
Yeah.
The hardest part of all this, though, is bringing it up. We're not used to asking these questions. So here's the key thing to remember. You can download this list. And when you're in the interview, you can say, listen, I've got this list of questions. It comes from career expert Mark Herschberg. He said, for both our sakes, we should run through these questions together. If you're a manager, you can bring it up to the candidate and say, I want to go through this with you. If you're a candidate, you can bring those up and do it. And the reason I say blame me, I literally use those words in the corresponding article, is because if you do feel pushback, if the manager says, oh, no, why are you doing this? This is weird. You can go, oh, okay, that Mark guy said it, but I guess he's an idiot. So you're right. We won't do it. You can blame me. You can throw me under the bus. That gives you the protection to bring up this topic and not feel like you are challenging them, saying, hey, why haven't you brought this up? Say, Mark is the one recommending we do it. So that's how you can bring it up. Now, of course, if they give you a lot of pushback and don't want to talk about it, that in itself might be a bit of a signal, but you can judge for yourself. So get those questions. We'll give you the URL at the end of the show. Get those questions. And I go through, here is how to bring it up in the interview, and then have an honest, detailed conversation about them.
You keyed in on something I was thinking as you said that, which was if there's a lot of pushback or a lot of hemming and hawing and a disregard of culture in the conversation, that would be an enormous red flag for me. A friend of mine and I have said for many years that the hiring process can be one of the most deceptive things organizations do, because the organization is trying to put their best face forward. The candidate's trying to put their best face forward. Where's the honesty in that? And I love how you position this with questions, right? Asking questions is a skill. And it is a skill that I'm continually trying to develop myself and that I encourage my coaching clients to develop, because you're never going to get the right answers if you don't ask the right questions.
Absolutely. And often it comes to show, don't tell. Don't
Mhm.
tell me
Yeah.
that you care about your employees. Give me examples. Show me your policies.
Yeah.
Make it concrete, because anyone can give lip service.
Sure.
And to your point, let's think about dating. I would not, after 3 dates, say, oh, let's move in together. We've had 3 dates, and let's face it, on those first few dates, that's usually we're putting our best foot forward.
Yep.
We're making a good impression. And yet, when it comes to jobs, it's only about 3 dates. It's maybe about 3
Mm.
interviews.
Yeah.
And we go, okay, well, let's move in together. Now let's spend 40 some hours a week together
Mm.
in maybe not a lifetime commitment, but certainly a long-term commitment.
Yeah.
And you are going in blind.
Absolutely. And so often, I was just having a conversation earlier today with somebody who has been at their job for just under 6 months. And already they're seeing culture red flags. Already they're seeing, wow, this is not exactly what I was told. And they're thinking, how long do I want to stay here? And I think the great resignation is in mass, like a whole bunch of people thinking, do I really want to stay where I am? As an employer, if there are people listening who have teams that they have hired, are there things they can do to invest in their team to show the value that they hold their team members in? I mean, how can they as leaders communicate that beyond just saying, hey, way to go, great job, so glad you're here, which, is important. You can't negate positive affirming words, but I love what you said. Show them. Like, what are some things that you've seen or that you would encourage leaders to do in that?
Here's something you can do. It's another free program I offer. Again, nothing to buy. You can take this. I don't even know. I don't get your email. You can create a peer learning program at your organization.
Mm.
Now, here's how it works, and then we'll talk about why you should do it. You take folks, I typically recommend groups of about 6 to 8 people in size, but you can scale it up. There's ways to do it with larger groups if you want. And you put them together and you say, we're going to help develop you in some of these skills we think are important: leadership, communication, negotiating, whatever skills you want on the list. So you put them in the group and you give them each every 2 weeks or once a month, however often they meet, you give them some content. Now, if you want to use my book, you can use it and we break down, here's how to chop it up and use different sections for different goals. If you don't want to use my book, you can use other books. You can use articles. You can use a great podcast like this one. They listen to the episode, but once they get the content, hear the episode or read those pages, they come together and have that discussion. Because it's in that discussion that we talk about leadership. That's not a do ABC and you're a leader. It's fuzzier and more complex. And it's in that discussion. This is how you really begin to understand leadership and develop those skills. This is how business schools teach it. This is how we teach it at MIT. And this is how you can do it. If, by the way, your company, you're saying, well, we're 3 people, I don't have 8. And it can be awkward if the CEO is there with more junior people. So if your company is not big enough, go find other companies or create a local meetup group and then just get people from different companies and mix up together. You actually want the diversity. You don't want all your salespeople in one group and all engineers in another. You want to get those diverse viewpoints. Now, when you put people together and train them up this way, there are 4 benefits. Remember, there's no cost. So first, you are upskilling your team. You get employees who are now more capable. Great. Second, you're engaging your employees. You're saying, I do care. I'm willing to invest in you. Maybe you're not spending money, but you're saying, I want you to spend an hour every other week doing this. That's more important than doing more emails. I care about you improving. And that's what we see employees want today. Third, you're creating internal networks, because now you've got your engineers in there with accounting and salespeople who don't normally talk to each other. And those internal networks really matter too. Finally, you're creating a common framework. If the book you pick is good to great, then I can say, hey, let's think about this using the hedgehog model. Everyone says, oh, I know exactly what you mean because we all read that book and we get it. You don't have to explain this to me. So you create that common language. So all four of those benefits from creating a free program to better engage and upskill your employees.
So practical, so helpful, and a free program.
100% free.
That is so incredibly generous, Mark. I mean, truly, I love your spirit of generosity and so much of what you've talked about today. You have had these experiences, and no experience is ever wasted, right? So understanding that, you're saying I want to take advantage of this and share what I've learned with other people so they can benefit and their teams can benefit. And I really hope our listeners are hearing that and keying into this. In
My
your book,
passion is helping people with their professional efficacy.
I love it. I'm always looking to get better at this. I'm learning. I'm taking notes as we're standing here. I mean, talking. This is fantastic. In your book, you make a claim, and this is pretty bold. You claim that someone can make $30,000 with your advice.
It is a bold claim, and I'm going to tell you exactly how to do it. Imagine you are 25 years old and you have a job offer for $50,000. But instead of taking the job as it is, you've learned to negotiate. You read the chapter on in my book, or you read some other book on negotiating, or you took a course. It doesn't have to be my advice, but my advice, I know that works. I know that advice is good. You learn to negotiate. So now, instead of just saying yes to that 50,000, you negotiate for $1,000 more. That's doable, just $1,000 and 52%. That's going to take you one 10-minute conversation or a couple emails back and forth. If you do that and you take the job now for $51,000 and do nothing else in your career, you stay in that job until you retire, those few minutes of work just got you $1,000 more for the next 40 years. You just earned $40,000. Now you're probably thinking, wait a second, I'm not going to stay in that job for 40 years. And you're right, you'll have promotions and raises and other jobs, and you can negotiate those as well. If you learn to negotiate, you can add 6 figures to your lifetime income easily. Now, here's the bigger secret. We can do this with negotiations because you can do the math. $1,000, 4 years, here we go. The same is true for any of these skills. It's not that someone's going to say, well, okay, you're a better networker, so here's $1,000 more.
Right.
By being the better networker, you've now gotten more opportunities or more sales or faster to answer, how will AI impact our company? Yeah. If you're a better leader, they might not say, here's $1,000 more, but you're going to stand out and you're going to get better assignments, and that's going to help you get bigger achievements to lead to more jobs. All of the skills we talk about in the book, all of them have the same ROI of just a small improvement will lead to a compounding effect that can translate into significantly more money and certainly overall more success.
I love that. I love the compounding effect of learning a skill and then continuing to grow. I have a question that I will often ask guests, and I'm gonna pose it to you. If you could go back and talk to the 22-year-old version of Mark, what would you tell yourself? What do you wish you had known then that you know now?
Invest much faster in these skills. If I had been a better negotiator earlier, that compounding would have happened earlier. If I had learned how to handle office politics earlier, I wouldn't have lost some of those earlier battles. If I understood the importance of leadership or communication, I could have been exhibiting that. People knew me as, you are technically very strong, but I was weaker in the other areas. And so I obviously did improve, but I would have liked to have improved faster. I think I would have achieved more if I had done that.
You're a continual learner, like all of the high performance leaders that I talk to. You never stop learning. Is there a book that has made a big difference in your journey that you would recommend to other leaders?
I'm going to name a few. And in fact, I list a whole bunch of them on my website. Nice. These are other books I either reference in mine, or they might not have gone to mine, but they did have an impact on me. So here's a couple of them that have stood out. One is Peopleware by Tom DeMarco and Timothy Lister. One of the best books on management that I've read. It's nominally on software projects. There's not a line of code in the book. And it really is a good general book on thinking about managing people.
Awesome.
Another great book, The Charisma Myth by Olivia Fox-Caban. It turns out charisma is a skill you can learn. And that opened my eyes to the fact that leadership is a skill you can learn, and networking and all these other things, we think of them as innate. And while it's true, some people are naturally charismatic or natural leaders or natural networkers, there's also natural soccer players and natural people who are good at languages or math. But the rest of us can get better and even surpass those people with regular practice. Same is true for these skills. So those two books, I think, had a big impact on me.
I can't wait to check those out myself. If you could share one piece of advice, Mark, with people who are listening today, as we move toward wrapping this up, what would that one piece of advice, that one takeaway be?
Well, we've shared a bunch already.
Indeed.
But I will simply say, when it comes to learning these skills, one of the reasons I recommend the peer learning is because these skills are not like learning chemistry or history. They're more akin to learning sports or music. You need to put them into application. You have to practice with them. And so this is why that peer learning group, it's hard to practice in the real world. You can't say to your team, hey, team, I'm going to practice a new type of management. And then when you piss everyone off, so timeout, do-over, doesn't count. You're doing it. There's no net. So by having these peer learning groups where you can discuss these ideas, or even you can get business school simulations and practice doing it, that's how we can try it out. Reading books is great. Obviously, I believe in it. I wrote one. Listening to podcasts, also great. But then you want to go deeper and not just, well, I heard the information. You want to practice with it. And that's where the peer learning comes in. So practice these skills, create those groups in your company or with others to really get hands-on experience.
I know folks are going to want to stay connected with you, Mark, and continue to learn from you. You've referenced your website, and we've talked about your book. Highly recommend every listener go and take advantage of these free resources and check out this book. What is the best way for people to stay connected with you and continue learning from you?
I'm going to give you two websites. The first, the careertoolkitbook.com. And that's where you can see where to get the book. You can get in touch with me or follow me on social media. It's a bunch of articles and that resources page with all the free resources we mentioned. Just go there, click and download or follow the links. I have a second website called brainbumpapp.com. Now I have a free app, and that has tips from my book, but also tips from other books, blogs, podcasts, talks that other people continue to add to. We're like Netflix, where you're just constantly adding new content.
That's awesome.
And so you can download, it's a completely free app from Android, for Android and iPhone. So brainbumpapp.com, download that app, and you've got the tips at your fingertips. So when you are going right to a conference and saying, what are those networking tips? You can pull it up in seconds, or you set up for a just daily reminder, because it's so easy to forget this after we finish the episode. You want a daily reminder. What are the things he talked about? So each day at a time you set, 9 a.m. as you start your day. Oh, yep, that's a good tip. Swipe, done. And it stays top of mind. So that's brainbumpapp.com. and the other website, the careertoolkitbook.com.
And I will have all of those links in the show notes. Mark, thank you. This has been so helpful and insightful for me, and I know for our listeners. Thank you for being so generous and sharing this. Thanks for joining me for this episode today. As we wrap up, I'd love for you to do two things. First, subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. And if you find value here, I'd love it if you would rate it and review it. That really does make a difference in helping other people to discover this podcast. Second, if you don't have a copy of my newest book, Catalytic Leadership, I'd love to put a copy in your hands. If you go to catalyticleadershipbook.com, you can get a copy for free. Just pay the shipping so I can get it to you, and we'll get one right out. My goal is to put this into the hands of as many leaders as possible. This book captures principles that I've learned in 20 plus years of coaching leaders in the entrepreneurial space, in business, government, nonprofits, education, and the local church. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn to keep up with what I'm currently learning and thinking about. And if you're ready to take a next step with a coach to help you intentionally grow and thrive as a leader, I'd be honored to help you. Just go to catalyticleadership.net to book a call with me. Stay tuned for our next episode next week. Until then, as always, leaders, choose to be catalytic.
Thanks for listening to Catalytic Leadership with Dr. William Attaway. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss the next episode. Want more? Go to catalyticleadership.net.